Welcome to this webinar on a very sunny day here on the South Coast. We've got a great cast for you today, hopefully, giving presentations around Portsmouth Roadside Renaissance and how the collaboration between key partners has reimagined the bus stop setting. The aim of today's webinar is to show how public-private collaboration can raise standards for safety, accessibility and sustainability, how commercial models and infrastructure investment programs can operate in tandem, and then also kind of focusing really less on individual products, but actually more on the strategy, delivery, governance and long-term value. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you spending time with us this morning. We're going to go through till around about 12 o'clock. We've got 5 great speakers. I'm not going to do the bios straight off. We'll do those as we go along. And we've got 5 speakers, which will take us around about halfway through. And then we've got time for questions at the end. There is a question and answers chat, so please feel free to put your questions into the Q&A chat. There's also a chat section, but that isn't for questions as well. We'll only be taking questions from the Q&A section. And we are going to, there's something else I've got to say that I've completely forgotten, which will come to me. We've also got, that's it, we've got some pre-submitted questions which will come to in due course as well. So if you have submitted a question beforehand, we'll likely ask 1 or 2 of those that have been submitted before. So without further ado, we're going to move on to our first speaker today. I would like to welcome Michael Solomon-Williams from the Campaign for Better Transport. He's their head of external affairs, and he's going to be talking to us today about the bus stop standards. So Michael, over to you.
Thanks, Paul. It's a great pleasure to be here to really look into the fantastic work that's happening in Portsmouth and that Bauer are involved in, and indeed talk more broadly about the phenomenal importance of bus stops in people's lives and people's communities. It's a very exciting time, I think, for buses and for bus stops, and really we're seeing increasing awareness of the importance of improving bus stop quality. That's both information and infrastructure. So, as Paul said, my name is Michael Solomon-Williams. I'm Head of External Affairs at Campaign for Better Transport, and I've been directly involved in our programme of working towards a bus stop standard nationally over the past couple of years. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. Looking at the importance of bus stops, why are we focusing on bus stops? To an extent, they might seem niche, if you like, in the grand scheme of public transport infrastructure and operations, but in fact, the reality is they are right at the heart of people's lives and communities. And I think there's a fantastic audience attendance at this webinar today. I think that's a real testament to quite how important people recognise bus stops to be. They are critical pieces of infrastructure. They're where the bus journey starts and ends, and really crucially, they are the shop window for bus services. And indeed, for many people, that's public transport fundamentally. It's many people's first potential experience of using public transport. And what's so important, I think, is that for many people who don't use public transport and are thinking about it, if they come across a bus stop which is not enticing them to use the bus service, then that's the end of it for them. So really getting these improvements right is so crucial to achieving the mode shift, as we call it, of course, in the industry, but just getting more people using buses across the country. As it says there, also they provide certainty, they improve comfort and sense of safety, and as I say, fundamentally increase bus use. But many we found have been falling short. They've been poorly maintained. There haven't been basic amenities like a shelter or seating, and no bus route information and timetables, and indeed no information about live bus arrivals. Now, should we expect every bus stop in the country to have live RTI? Absolutely not. But the developing technology in that space has been extremely rapid. And what we can really see is that while, if you like, technology on board buses has really developed rapidly over the last few decades, bus stops haven't always kept up, but they're starting to do so. Next slide, please. So accessibility is a really key piece in this jigsaw. We know that an estimated 16 million people in the UK do have some form of disability. 40% of Transport for All survey respondents have experienced inadequate bus stops, and that includes inaccessible street space and street clutter, poor signage, a lack of shelter or seating, and no information about arrivals or diversions. We know that accessible bus stops promote equity, dignity and mobility for all. They enable independent travel, improve comfort and safety, and increase bus use. And that's so important. Transport for All is a fantastic organisation, and their name is very powerful because we know that in areas beyond transport, accessibility improvements help everybody else. So fundamentally, a rising tide lifts all ships. We've seen it, the well kind of documented classic examples of things like automatic doors, toothbrushes, electric toothbrushes, these things that were invented for accessibility needs. Did you know that perhaps a less known technology that was invented for accessibility need is the telephone itself? Fundamentally, the telephone was developed in order to improve accessibility for people with visual impairments. How compelling is that as an example? So really, if we are led by accessibility needs and we support that huge number of people in the population who suffer from a disability, we will all benefit as well. Next slide, please. So many in our survey, we discovered lack basic features. We did a big public survey in advance of our report, Better Bus Stops, and that survey found that there was a significant lack of a shelter, a roof or covered area. Now, I know, if you like, that survey speaks in quite general terms, and we wouldn't expect every bus stop, or in DFT terminology, every bus stopping place, to have a shelter necessarily. Different bus stops serve different needs. There are flag stops, there are shelters, there are interchanges, but these are the top line stats that we found from our survey. Many did lack a shelter, many lacked seating, and what's very important indeed is that many lacked an up-to-date timetable. If you look at that graph, there are three key pieces that I'd like to take out of that. The third one down, 31% lacking an up-to-date timetable. That's really shocking. We found many people write to us and say, I tried to get the bus, I went to my local bus stop, and the timetable had last been updated in 2013. I mean, literally, these are some of the examples we get. And if you look a couple of blocks down on that graph, beneath lighting, a digital display with live updates and an up-to-date map of bus routes in the area, only 16% had either of those things, which is really quite shocking. So it's no surprise that many people who we want to take the bus turn up at a bus stop and they think, how could I? How could I know? There's no faith in that. Next slide, please. We then asked what factors affected people's use of bus stops and what would make people more inclined to use the bus. And what really came out strongly at the bottom there is information, indeed live updates, RTI. That's clearly a very crucial element for many people. And I think it's important that people have got used to having live updates at railway stations for many years, tram stops as well. And some people do have access to updates on their phones, but that's not necessarily what we want to be aspiring towards, everybody to depend upon mobile phones, because that involves digital exclusion. And also it simply isn't an equivalent to having live updates at the bus stops themselves. So that's the most prominent request of potential bus users. They've also said that a timetable, an up-to-date timetable, will make people likely to use the bus more. That's 52% there. And people do really value the quality of clean, weatherproof bus shelters, nice seating. That's always going to encourage people. For those bus stops which can have a shelter, that's really going to help people use the bus. I went travelling around the country last autumn to do bus stop stories, which people may have seen online, and we're launching that in Westminster also next week. Talking to people at bus stops, and many people really emphasise the importance of comfort, shelters, seating, and indeed there are many people who weren't using the bus who liked those bus stops as places to gather and meet. So I think it's really important that we emphasise the importance of comfort. Next slide, please. So why might we need a bus stop standard? Well, fundamentally, it's important to recognise that there are different standards for rail and for bus. There have been standards in place for a long time for railway stations. Here, this example I think is very compelling. This is Sugarloaf Station in Wales, which only has very infrequent passage of trains. I believe it's under 10 trains a week, but they nevertheless have up-to-date digital information and timetables. Next to that is Mold, which is a bus interchange in North Wales. They have far more frequent buses going through there. I went there on my travels for bus stop stories. I think they have, multiple buses an hour going through that interchange, and yet there are no timetables. There's no printed timetables, there's no digital updates, none of it. And indeed, there's a great guy there, David Blaney, people may know, who drives buses there on a Saturday, and he's ended up voluntarily printing timetables, putting them in laminates and sticking them on the side of those bus shelters. And people will come up to him when he's sitting in his bus, he's having a sandwich, and say, when's the next bus going? It's an extraordinary situation to be in. And I think that side-by-side example is really compelling. Next slide, please. So as I say, there are different standards for railway stations and for buses, and for bus stops, but there are also different standards for buses themselves and the bus stops. So as of last October, we know there is now regulation for onboard information for buses. So buses are required to have up-to-date information and audio-visual information. And again, accessibility has driven that change. It's fantastic. So the outlier, if you like, is the bus stops themselves. The outlier in these three, out of these three, rail stations, buses, bus stops are left. So what we really want to do is achieve that set of standards for bus stops so that we can really sort of square the circle or join the dots and make people feel confident to use the bus. Next slide, please. There's a bit of a graphic here, a bit of a matrix that I think it's important for us to focus upon. And again, accessibility is really key. Accessibility is what guides us. And we are currently working in our national working group on developing a standard and set of standards across the country. And it's important to note that the Department for Transport's accessibility lead are part of that group. They're developing accessibility guidelines, and that's going to tick many of the boxes that we're aiming to tick to achieve what we want to achieve. So accessibility leads us. Then the three other elements that come into this are comfort, safety, legibility. And legibility, if you like, is that clarity of up-to-date digital information, printed information, really making things easy for people to read by whichever means they use to read their information. And indeed, with accessibility, we have tools that are available for people to hear information if they need to do so. Next slide, please. So, how are we getting on? I mentioned our working group. So the Department for Transport has extremely warmly welcomed our work in this space. And it's very inspiring that we have gathered together, if you like, main stakeholders across the country, the infrastructure providers, the operators, the local authorities, the DfT, and there's a real groundswell of focus and progress towards making these improvements. The Bus Services Act has given the Secretary of State the power to issue statutory guidance to improve accessibility and personal safety, and that team are part of our working group, as I say. The working group nationally is sharing learnings across government and the industry, working alongside these accessibility guidelines and development and supporting local authorities. And the British Standards Institution is also very keen to develop a BSI standard, and they're looking for funding to do so. And we're on the way to getting there with much preparatory work complete. And then what we're seeing is that there's significant amounts of funding and long-term funding allocated in BSIPs for people to spend on infrastructure upgrades, and that is happening. That's happening in places including Blackpool. It's happening right across the country. Great Yarmouth, fantastic upgrades there, and indeed Transport for Wales themselves are creating a standard and auditing all of their bus stops. So there's a real kind of sense of groundswell of progress right across England and Wales, and nowhere setting the standard, of course, more fantastically than Portsmouth, which is why we're here. I think that is my set of slides. Let's just check if the next slide might say thank you. It does. Just thank you for listening. So there we are. Thank you very much for listening. It's a really exciting moment, I think, in this space. As I mentioned, the importance of long-term ring-fence funding cannot be overemphasized. That's really enabled local authorities to make the progress that we're making. And I would heartily encourage everybody on this call who's not already involved in the bus stop standard to get involved and join us on this very exciting journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Very, very good, and a very good scene setting, I think, for what we're about to embark on for the rest of this session. So thank you for that. One thing I didn't do at the beginning of this session was introduce myself. I still wasn't going to introduce everybody else until they came on, but I did introduce myself. So apologies for that. For those of you thinking that it's good to see that Dr. Evil's got a new job in public transport, my name is Paul Walker, and I'm the head of passenger transport at Portsmouth City Council. So welcome today. We now move on to the next set of presentations, which come from the development of partnership at Portsmouth City Council. We genuinely, totally believe in partnership at Portsmouth City Council, not only in terms of our relationship with our bus operators, but also in relation to our work with our strategic suppliers and partners, and that is a culmination of what's happened today. So moving on, we now hear from Richard Gagg, who's the passenger transport team leader at Portsmouth. Richard, take it away.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Yeah, I'm Richard Gagg, passenger transport team leader at Portsmouth City Council, and I'm delighted to share the work we've been doing to reimagine the not-so-humble bus stop using some of our bus service improvement plan investment. Bus stops are where most journeys begin. They're the front door of the bus network, but historically, they've been one of the most overlooked parts of it. In Portsmouth, we've set out to change that using BSIP funding and strong partnership working to deliver a step change in the passenger waiting environment. Next slide, please. So, why were bus shelters prioritised within Portsmouth's £53 million BSIP investment? Early on in the planning phase of the BSIP programme, we identified a desire amongst our bus users and residents to see us prioritise the roadside offer. When we engaged with passengers, one message was absolutely clear: stops and shelters were a priority. While operators and transport authorities often think in terms of routes, frequencies and fares, for passengers the experience of bus travel begins before they board the bus. If the bus stop is dark, uninviting, unclear or uncomfortable, that first impression detracts from everything else that follows. Indeed, if you get this bit wrong, nothing else may actually follow at all, as research has shown that the waiting environment is a key factor in getting new people to try the bus and deliver the coveted modal shift. Updating the waiting environment directly supports BSIP objectives and growth and passenger experience. It aligns with local and national policy frameworks, it delivers a rapid and visible improvement, and it helps re-establish confidence in the bus network. Simply put, improving bus stops was one of the quickest and most cost-effective ways to make public transport feel like a modern, reliable proposition. So, what challenges were passengers and the network facing before the upgrade programme began? Next slide, please. Before the programme began, we were dealing with a set of issues that will feel very familiar to many of you. Passenger information was sometimes unreliable or inconsistent or not there at all. Accessibility barriers affected wheelchair users, buggy users, older people and those with mobility needs, preventing them from using their local bus stop. Some sites created operational constraints through things like poor stop layouts or laybys on busier traffic routes, both of which caused longer dwell times. The older and more worn out parts of our roadside estate tainted the network as a whole, which consequentially suffered from a perception of lower quality. And demand for bus stop improvements often outpaced the resources we had available. And these factors can create a cycle of perceived decline. Poor facilities equals lower satisfaction, equals lower use, equals less investment, equals further decline. And breaking that cycle had to start with the environment that people use the most, the bus stop. One thing I want to emphasize is how much we've learned through this program by being agile. Improving bus stops sounds simple: replace a shelter, add information, fix accessibility, but in reality, each location had its own story. Some stops required working more closely with local businesses and residents. Others have involved coordinating carefully with utilities, drainage teams, or heritage and conservation experts. What this reinforced for us is delivering high quality public transport infrastructure is very much about collaboration and communication. And what was really encouraging was the level of enthusiasm we saw. People genuinely cared about their local bus stop, whether it was a request for seating or better lighting or simply for a shelter to feel more welcoming. The feedback helped shape a programme that truly reflects what our community wanted from their bus network. So, how does improving the waiting environment support wider transport, mobility and regeneration goals? Next slide, please. Bus stops are not just pieces of infrastructure, they are places. They help shape how people move, how confident they feel, and how attractive an area is. A quality, obviously loved bus stop can create a perception that the locality in which it is found is equally loved. Of course, the reverse of this is equally true. Improving the waiting environment helps deliver multiple strategic goals. Better stops encourage people to reconsider short car trips and deliver modal shift. A well-designed, accessible stop opens opportunities for people who otherwise may struggle to travel. High-quality public transport infrastructure that is obviously being looked after supports vibrant local centres and creates a perception of quality for the wider locality. Safety and confidence in bus travel benefits from a safe, well-lit, visible shelter and makes public transport a desirable option at more times of day. Network performance can be improved with better layouts, delivering reduced dwell times and therefore improved reliability. And environmental goals are supported by more bus use, which means lower emissions and cleaner air. In short, a bus stop upgrade is potentially much more than just a bus stop upgrade. It's an enabler for a healthier, greener and more connected city. So what were the council's core objectives? Next slide, please. Our objectives were shaped directly by what passengers told us mattered the most. So what were these? First of all, accessibility. We sought to identify and fix bus stops in our city with accessibility challenges. We're making every one of our bus stops accessible to all of our bus users. Secondly, safety. Lighting, visibility, and where appropriate, CCTV all contribute to a sense of personal safety and reassurance. Perception is a key word here. Bus stops don't have to be unsafe to feel unsafe to some people, and improving that perception of safety is the key to improving confidence in the network. Usability. This includes real-time information and lots of it, including 100% audio readout functionality, signage, mapping, improved comfort, interactive screens, and digital timetables. And perception. Passengers will judge the network by what they see and feel at the stop. Improving shelters by repainting them, fixing roofs and seats, prioritizing cleanliness, and adding features like living roofs and defibrillators helps transform how public transport is perceived across Portsmouth. These objectives form the backbone of our design standards and procurement, delivering a network that is functional, welcoming, and consistent. So why is high quality infrastructure essential to making public transport a viable choice? Next slide, please. Passengers weren't asking for futuristic design. Super shelter does not need to mean huge shelters or some grand architectural statement. That's for the basics to be done properly. Real-time information that works all of the time, comfortable seating, better lighting, more shelter, security features, a clear, accurate, and consistent information. These elements build trust, and trust leads to choice. Next slide, please. When the waiting environment is poor, people will default to the car. When it's comfortable, reliable, and safe, people will reconsider. And when the bus arrives on time and the experience from stop to stop feels consistent and well cared for, that choice starts to stick. High quality stops also play a practical role in making services more efficient and resilient. A stop that's well designed can reduce dwell times, keep services running to timetable, and support smoother interchanges with walking, cycling, and future mobility modes. Next slide, please. Ultimately, passenger experience shapes perception, perception shapes choice, and choice shapes the success of the network. If we want people to choose the bus, the experience at the stop must make that choice easier. To wrap up, Portsmouth's investment in bus stop infrastructure has been about far more than shelters. It's been about creating a network that feels modern, safe, inclusive, and reliable from the very first moment a passenger interacts with it. By focusing on the fundamentals, we're delivering a high-impact, value-for-money programme that benefits passengers today and strengthens the network for the future. And that's me done. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Rich. I think the true Yorkshireman there saying basics done properly. I think that's certainly something we'll take away from that. I mentioned at the beginning about the question and answers section comments. The questions are literally trickling in as we speak. The sooner you get the question in, the sooner the likelihood is I'll pick it as a question to ask the team. So please don't be shy. Otherwise, we'll all have to sit here in silence for the last 20 minutes contemplating our life choices, and we really don't want to be doing that. So we're going to move on then now to a colleague of ours, Neil Chapman, who's the product design engineer for Europe, the UK, and indeed Portsmouth for Bauer Media Outdoor. So Neil, over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Neil. My role in BMO is to work with all parties and our customers to make sure we can provide the right infrastructure. So as Richard has covered off the infrastructure itself, I'm going to focus on how we approach infrastructure strategically. And the way we achieve that is not through one product or one innovation. It's through how we design, deliver, and govern the infrastructure across its full life cycle, and most importantly, how we partner with our customers. So when we talk about a strategic delivery partner, we don't just start with the products. To begin with, infrastructure must align directly with transport strategy. So Michael's touched a little bit on that. That means understanding local and national transport strategies, bus service improvement plans, devolution priorities, passenger insight, accessibility needs, any new legislative changes, decarbonisation targets, and obviously infrastructure costs. So next slide, please. Sorry, Mr. We then need to ensure the infrastructure supports these ambitions, not just operationally, but visibly, especially as bus shelters and stops are the most visible sign of transport investment. And if we want to support modal shift that we're all trying to achieve, improve safety and increase passenger confidence, the infrastructure must actively enable those outcomes. For example, lighting, real-time passenger information, and accessibility design all directly influence ridership and the perception of safety. So these are not aesthetic decisions, these are behavioral and policy decisions. Next slide, please. So when you get to it, the design should always start with insights. An obvious thing to say, but there's no universal best fit shelter. Context really matters. For Portsmouth, we looked at the passenger volumes, accessibility requirements, the urban versus more suburban, city centre versus more suburban environment, safety, and obviously commercial viability. And that drives a flexible product portfolio approach. And then a number of capabilities need to come together. So strong R&D, manufacturing know-how, installation expertise, and obviously maintenance competency. And all of this is backed up and accredited by third parties to prove you know how to do it and you're doing it correctly. But what matters most is the integration, the commercial model, product design, a robust and transparent supply chain, and life cycle planning all working together. The right solution then is able to be deployed in the right location, and that will always deliver better outcomes than a one-size-fits-all estate. Next slide, please. Another crucial element of success, particularly in relation to Portsmouth, is embedding life cycle thinking from day one. Too often, infrastructure can be designed and delivered, and then only later you think about maintenance and reporting and governance is considered. The reality, as we all know, infrastructure is around for 10, 15, 20 years. It's a long-term commitment. Design choices then affect maintenance frequency, energy consumption, which we know goes up and down, so it can change quite dramatically depending on what's happening in global markets. Accessibility, compliance, upgrade pathways, and the total cost of ownership. So whole life cycle asset management will reduce reactive maintenance and improve reliability, but it also improves passenger trust. It will also avoid fragmentation between capital delivery and operational management. It's important that when infrastructure performance is determined at the design stage, it can be protected through maintenance, but that shifts infrastructure from a reactive liability to a managed asset. And then the supply chain is also really incredibly important, so that you have the ability to avoid what is commonly some of the biggest risks in infrastructure delivery. A robust supply chain will manage any volatility in material sourcing and pricing, but also ensure constant quality while embedding sustainability and compliance into key sourcing decisions. And then governance, it really, really matters. Clear performance standards, transparent reporting, and defined accountability. And all of this turns a contract then into a long-term partnership. And that's our 360-degree approach. Next slide, please. So I've split the value proposition into two. I think you can demonstrate short-term value quite quickly. You want to demonstrate confidence and transparency. Our partners want to see defined performance standards, transparent agreements, clear SLAs and expectations, but also the bus users themselves, the most important people in this context, are able to see the delivery of the projects and appropriate solutions for each context. For example, a high footfall interchange might justify a super stop with digital integration and enhanced passenger facilities, but a more suburban stop might require something more simpler. And how do you communicate that? So we recognise the funding realities as well, but do passengers. So it's really important that you're able to be transparent with passengers, and short-term wins build momentum and public trust. And obviously public trust is critical when infrastructure is so highly visible. Next slide, please. So the flip to that is the long-term value. The long-term value is where strategic thinking really pays off, focusing on monitoring of your estate, refurbishment over replacement, predictive maintenance wherever possible to lower costs, and adaptability and upgrade paths. So you can adapt to evolving technology, but also compliance and evolving standards. So we've mentioned the bus stop national standard earlier. And infrastructure shouldn't be static. Digital systems evolve. Sustainability targets evolve. The demands on the city evolve. The technology and micromobility options evolve. So you need to, if you design rigidly, you'll create not only future costs, but it also might prevent that adaptability, which kind of prevents you from protecting long-term public value. And also whole life cycle estate management reduces reactive interventions and improves overall performance consistency, which obviously benefits both authorities and passengers, but really empowers things like safety. Next slide, please. So the kind of there's always a tricky thing, public-private collaboration. I know it's in the public sector, it's something that we really need to overcome, because it's really powerful. High quality infrastructure is essential if you want buses to be attractive and competitive. High quality infrastructure will also support modal shift, as I've mentioned, and commercial funding reduces the pressure on public capital, and innovation will improve things like passenger experience. Transparency is obviously essential. A clear governance framework, shared KPIs, and open reporting ensure all parties understand the performance. But when the collaboration works well, we think it can raise standards across the network, not just at the flagship sites. Public-private collaboration allows us to improve accessibility standard, fund and maintain infrastructure without full capital burden, and invest in research and design improvements. And we see this as a shared stewardship of public spaces. After all, we all live and work, and our families and friends in these spaces. And many of us get the bus and multimodal transport. And when it's done well, we think it can raise the standard across all networks. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to finish on continuous investment and innovation, because I don't think the partnership ends when your last bus shelter is installed or replaced. Innovation is obviously important, but it's the scale that creates impact. The challenge is not just coming up with innovation, but applying improvements consistently across thousands of assets. There might be sustainable materials, improved lighting, safety design, better accessibility, smarter installation methodologies that reduce the time you need on site or the amount of concrete you need, reducing the carbon. And there's always improvements in real-time passenger information. And I think private sector competition will drive innovation. There is a competition factor here that we compete to win the tenders. And then when you add in the governance I mentioned and delivery capability, you can determine whether innovation benefits the whole estate. So you're not just doing innovation for innovation's sake. And small improvements genuinely multiplied across a network create transformational change. So in closing, I think infrastructure success isn't about the shelter alone. It's about strategy, governance, life cycle thinking and partnership. It's about aligning infrastructure with transport strategy. You design with the end user in mind, or better still, you design with the user. You manage supply chain risk. You plan for maintenance before installation. And you measure the long-term impact, not just the short-term delivery. And that's how you deliver value, more impact, less impact on the planet, but also, more value for bus passengers. That's me finished, Paul.
Thank you, Neil. Brilliant. Really, really good. A lot of ground covered there. So thank you very much. Moving swiftly on, we're 2/3 of the way through. We've managed to keep most of you engaged, I think, well, at least online, and the questions are flowing in. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. And the next cab off the rank is Alison Buckle, who's a senior passenger transport officer at Portsmouth City Council. So Alison, take it away.
Thank you, everybody. Good morning. I'm Alison Buckle, Passenger Transport Officer, as Paul's just said. I've been asked to speak in a bit more detail today about Portsmouth and why upgraded shelters benefit our community. I've had the pleasure and privilege of helping to deliver the Super Stop part of the BSIP programme. Building on why bus stops matter in Portsmouth, I'll now share a little bit about what we've done. As you all know, the bus stop is the start and end of the bus part of someone's journey, shaping expectations and confidence. Today, I'll talk you through Portsmouth's experience of using a collaborative, passenger-first approach to improve bus stops and raise standards for safety, accessibility, and sustainability. I must say, there's been 3 excellent presentations so far, so forgive me if there's a tiny bit of repetition. Next slide, please. In June 2024, we commissioned WSP to undertake a report on super stops. They highlighted a list of places where super stops would serve our community well. The super stops replaced existing shelters, so no planning was required. WSP produced a list of passenger-first shelters and listed a series of desirable features. As Rich mentioned before, these shelters were not full of gimmicks. They're not spaceships. They're just high-quality shelters satisfying the modern passengers' needs. They formed part of the hierarchy of bus shelter improvements in our city. We digested the contents of the report and we met with Bauer in August 2024, and our journey began. A little over a year later, our first 6 Super 6 shelters, bit of a tongue twister, Super 6 shelters were ready, and in September 2025 we were able to show them off at Quality Bus. Next slide, please. WSP highlighted almost 20 sites across the city, of which we decided on 13, geographically placed north, south, east and west. 23 were commissioned super stop lights, and then 4 were designated bespoke super stops, more of which later. Super stops differ from normal shelters in that they're more comfortable, they provide more information and have special features to support safety and accessibility, and are very much designed with sustainability in mind. Next slide, please. Taking improved comfort first, the super stops are light and bright and hopefully welcoming. They offer protection from the elements. They have smart lighting to provide reassurance to the passenger. And yes, they have wooden seats. Wooden seats that are made of Douglas fir. They are ergodynamic. They support your back. They have armrests. For the skeptics amongst you, the wooden seats are not a step backwards. They may seem retro, but they have been exceptionally well received. They're a quality product, and together with the etched glass with the Portsmouth buses logo, they make the shelter look very smart in areas that maybe don't look so smart. The glass is anti-glare and yes, provides UV protection. Next slide, please. Super stops provide clear information. In addition to the basic timetable case, they have a large route map that is designed for each stop, especially for nervous passengers like me that needs to know exactly where they are and what bus is going to take them to the next destination. They have real-time information and QR codes for journey planning. Their USP is that they have Wi-Fi, and 7 of them have smart bays. A smart bay is an information screen offering interactive wayfinding. Users are able to link via Google to defaults such as onward travel, rail, port, ferry, local events, and then restaurants and hotels should they wish. They also have widgets, the time, date, weather. In our case, we just have 2 languages. We are developing further languages. At the moment, we're just using English and French. Next slide, please. We hope that super stops are perceived as a safe space. They're light, bright, and they improve visibility for passengers and bus drivers. 7 of the super stops have inbuilt defibrillators, which are registered with the circuit. Bauer are partnered with the Community Heartbeat Trust, and once installed, these 7 will take the city's defibrillators to over 40. Next slide, please. Super stops are designed with accessibility and inclusivity in mind. They are the values that run through all of our shelter work. We have priority seating, and the shelter is designed to allow for passengers with mobility issues to navigate their way through and on and off the bus. We've worked with Bauer, the Pocklington Trust, and PCC's own visually impairment officer to place the touch buttons in an accessible and uniform place, They have braille, and we've adapted the touch buttons so that they are louder in the city centre stops. Next slide, please. Super stops have been designed with sustainability in mind. Glass rather than plastic to help with recycling. The lighting is energy efficient, and the majority have been built with a living roof. The trays for the plants are made from recycled plastic. The soil substrate is compost made from garden waste. The plants have been approved by the Wildlife Trust. In a densely populated city such as Portsmouth, the more greening we have, the better. Next slide, please. As mentioned before, ultimately, investing in super stops is one of the enormous package of products that Portsmouth has invested in to make the bus easier and more attractive, and a more attractive choice. By improving the waiting environment, we reduce the friction of using the bus. We hope to create a space that feels comfortable and welcoming and makes people more willing to choose the bus over car. Clear information, safer spaces, and a better wayfinding build confidence, removing some of the uncertainty that can put people off when travelling. Super stops also help journeys feel more seamless. They support an easy interchange and multimodal travel. They improve the first and last mile connectivity and make it simpler for people to combine different ways of getting around. Just as importantly, visible investment over time reinforces that choice. High quality infrastructure alongside positive messaging and advertising that promotes the bus use signals care and reliability. That then helps build trust, pride, and repeat use. And this isn't a one-off. We see it as continuous improvement, with ongoing enhancements such as the new defibrillators and upgrades. The introduction of 4 bespoke super stops with integrated void docks, as you can see in the picture, further strengthens the first and last mile and supports the longer term shift from car to bus. Next slide, please. To conclude, what we have learnt here in Portsmouth. One of the clearest lessons for us in Portsmouth is that bus stops are a key part of the bus journey and play that significant role in shaping behaviour. They are the start and the end of the journey, and they influence whether the bus feels like a good option. Taking this passenger-first approach helps remove barriers to travel. Clear information, safer spaces, and inclusive design builds confidence. And confidence, as we know, is a big factor as to whether people use the bus. We've seen how quality infrastructure signals care. A high standard, well-designed stop shows that public transport matters and that passengers matter, which helps build trust and encourages repeat use. Finally, it's not just about what we deliver, it's about how those improvements are sustained. Keeping standards high over time protects the passenger experience and supports lasting behaviour change. We have a first-class, expensive super stop programme. We have a first-class partnership with Bauer, who have been with us on the super stop journey from design to implementation, and now continue to be our partners in maintaining these super stops and indeed keeping all of our estate in tip-top condition. Sarah has been our main contact at Bauer, and we couldn't have asked for a better colleague, an ultimate professional, and I'll hand over to her now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. You've got me as the middle of that particular sandwich, but thanks for that. And I think just one comment on that. I think you meant extensive rather than expensive on the last slide. At least I hope so. Otherwise, we're going to have a separate discussion outside.
Absolutely. Bit tongue-tied.
Okay, great stuff. Okay, right, let's move on. Thanks for all the questions that we've got coming in. We've got 29 in the chat, so in the Q&A. For those of you that are asking questions in the chat, copy and paste, put it in the QA, because that's where we'll be concentrating in terms of questions as we progress. So just make sure that you're asking questions in the Q&A. Chatting away in the chat is all very good, but we'll be concentrating on the Q&A section for the Q&A. Right, Sarah, over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Morning, everyone. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about how our partnership with Portsmouth demonstrates effective public-private collaboration, and how it's a good fit for our company purpose, and how working with the team has actually reshaped our approach to collaboration. Next slide, please. This is a best-in-class example of how partnerships should work. We have a core team with honest and clear lines of communication, with the ability to bring in additional support both sides when required. And Portsmouth challenged us from the very start. Defibrillators on shelters and connected transport with e-scooters or bikes were not even in scope before we embarked on this project. Developing super stops, reviving, replacing and creating new locations for shelters was a bespoke response to the resident survey carried out pre-project, the results of which formed the key objectives: to provide safe, connected public infrastructure, ensuring a positive experience for passengers before they get on the bus. And this was presented to us during our first face-to-face meeting back in 2024. Next slide, please. Timing is everything. And the day before that meeting, we had just launched a video showcasing our Revive project, which, as the name suggests, is a way of prolonging the life of a shelter, so long as it's structurally sound, for up to 10 years. By reviving and not replacing shelters has a huge impact on carbon emissions, saving 94% of every shelter. This was when the BSIP team had a bit of a light bulb moment, as they realised this could be a way to transform all shelters across the city in a sustainable and cost-effective way. An audit of all shelters was quickly organised, the results of which enabled us to propose a revival project of 251 of the 300 shelters. Those that were beyond reviving, we proposed to be replaced. Portsmouth residents were not only acquiring 27 brand new state-of-the-art super stops, distributed equally around the city, they were getting the rest of the estate reimagined. At the same time, Bauer Media would benefit from an amazing looking platform on which brands could advertise. Happy clients all round. Next slide, please. This timeline demonstrates the engagement at all levels across this project, and the Portsmouth team ensured all stakeholders felt valued and a part of the wider project. Everyone was accountable and wanted to be part of the Portsmouth project. We were all working to the first deadline of the Quality Bus Conference in September 2025, where we would showcase the first 5 super stops and a selection of revived shelters in the city centre on a walking tour, hosting alongside the Portsmouth BSIP team to interested delegates, of which there were many. Next slide, please. Our purpose for many years now has not only to be a platform for brands, but equally a platform for good. As we continue to innovate, we're thinking beyond just advertising and asking how each and every display that we maintain and every contract we operate can help to support the public, the environment, as well as the organisations working for good. And the brief from Portsmouth was a perfect fit for that strategy. More impact for brands, more value for communities, but with less impact on the planet. The first time Alison and I spoke about the Superstop concept, it was made very clear that this wasn't about size or creating an architectural statement. It was about providing connected shelters in limited spaces with practical functionality according to the needs of the communities served. Portsmouth is one of the most densely populated cities outside of London. Providing a comprehensive and inclusive bus network was the main brief, but this extended to the bus infrastructure, which, based on the resident survey, had to be safe, well lit, weather protected, provide up-to-date information and accessible to all. It was also important that each shelter could be maintained within the current maintenance contract. Next slide, please. Our platform for brands and platform for good purpose shows how public and private sectors working together benefit everyone. Landlords and local authorities benefit from the useful and conscious public infrastructure, as well as receiving rents which contribute towards the public purse. The public benefit from safe, well-maintained, useful and environmentally friendly infrastructure, which improves communities. Advertisers and brands choose to buy out-of-home media, not only for its ability to reach the public or audiences, but also to align with a media channel that's taking its environmental responsibilities seriously. The fact that 46p in every pound spent on out-of-home advertising goes back into the public purse through rent, business rates, and environmental initiatives feeds into our clients' CSR strategies, which is a tangible commercial benefit. In turn, this gives Bauer Media Outdoor the opportunity to build and maintain ad-funded infrastructure, invest in social good and environmental initiatives, and return a large part of our revenues to councils and local authorities. Next slide, please. Success only comes by listening to our partners. And this is nothing new. By working with over 180 council partners in the UK, we've built our product portfolio around the needs of communities, urban and rural, UK-wide. Next slide, please. A number of our partners are on the same journey as Portsmouth. Mobility hubs, connected transport hubs, and now super stops are all in discussion. Better Transport has played a big part in this and is influencing our product and design strategy with safety, accessibility, information and lighting at its core. Working with Portsmouth at the Quality Bus Conference allowed us to showcase what's possible in terms of public transport infrastructure, but that was Portsmouth's vision based on the needs of the Portsmouth residents. From this, we are talking to our partners about their communities. Ultimately, it comes down to people. Councils are a people business, and so are we. Next slide, please. The project with Portsmouth gave us a live showcase to demonstrate what best-in-class infrastructure can do for a community and has encouraged us to significantly develop our ambitions in the provision of innovative street furniture across the UK. Our depot in Saltrey, Cambridgeshire is now a showcase for all our products, as well as being a working depot. Last year, for the first time, we opened our doors to a number of councils to share our ambitions, but also to encourage a different way of working, giving us both space to explore and understand future development plans and open up wider conversations. The Portsmouth partnership was not a business as usual team. The BSIP team sat outside of the day-to-day running of the contract. It was a unique collaboration where we could work as one unit with the same focus, desired outcomes and deadlines. They trusted us to deliver on time, and we worked as one team to meet expectations and will continue to do so until the project finishes later this year. Enhancing the shelters will give new infrastructure to Portsmouth, but will also enhance the important advertising network that in turn will help fund the maintenance and community projects that make Bauer Media Outdoor a platform for good. Thank you. You can come back on now, Paul.
I'm here. Thank you very much, Sarah. And I think hopefully one thing that's come across from this, some of the presentations, is that we try to work quite closely. That any colleagues from local authorities will know that quite often the roadside contract is very much kind of, the income doesn't go into the public transport team. It's something that's possibly historic. It's basically sort of goes into the general fund, and it's kind of arm's length dealt with. What we tried to do through this, we had a new team within our team at Portsmouth City Council, a new team at Bauer, and actually working together we actually cracked on and delivered stuff in a slightly different way. The question I'll probably ask at the end is, what would you do differently, which Sarah will probably answer, not pick up the phone. But actually it's hopefully you've got a feel there for what we've been working on. Okie dokie, right. We've got some questions that are coming in, so thank you for that. We'll come to those in a minute. We've got some pre-submitted questions for our panel. If our panel are happy to turn their cameras on, and we will go to you as and when. We're going to start off with a pre-submitted question. And this is, I'm going to ask this to Michael and Rich. And this is from Gareth Preston from the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. And he's asking, have the upgrades to bus stops and shelters resulted in increased volumes of passenger journeys at these locations? And has passenger satisfaction increased as a result of these shelter upgrades? Michael, would you like to go first?
Absolutely. Thanks, Gareth. That's a really, really good question. Short answer from our point of view is we don't know in terms of our research. I don't know if any studies have been done at local authority level, but I'm really glad you asked that question, because I think what would be very powerful for us continuing this work would be to do some surveying in that regard, because this is all a very live situation. Obviously, Portsmouth is very recent, and other local authorities is very recent too. So it's a great provocation, a great suggestion, and I think we're going to incorporate that and follow that up in our research. Because if we can really demonstrate over a period of time the clear connection between these improvements and increased patronage, and then that will really help, I think, make the case for the work that's been done. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Rich?
In a Portsmouth context, I think we can confidently say yes. We've obviously got a really big programme of work as part of BSIP in Portsmouth, bus lanes, more buses. I won't bore you all with the list, but it's a lot more than just the work that we're talking about today. But our patronage has grown enormously, more than 40%, and the bus shelter work and bus stop work is an important part of that. Further to that, the passenger focus work that we do and transport focus work that we do, and the survey of respondents, which I think are sort of nationwide, in Portsmouth, they've already shown customer satisfaction levels going up, specifically around bus stops and bus shelters and information. We've still got work to do, and we will always have work to do. This will never stop. But the evidence is clearly there that satisfaction is up and patronage is up across the wider piece. So I would be confidently assert yes is the answer to that question.
Thank you. Another pre-submitted question. We've got a few of these that have been similar ones that have been mentioned, I think, in the chat as well. So we'll answer it once. I think this is from Alan Davison at Hull City Council. How has the authority implemented improvements to bus stops where there is also an adjacent cycle track? I think this is probably one for Rich.
The short answer is independently. At the start of the BSIP programme in Portsmouth, 3 years ago now, we chose not to do anything with floating bus stops because there was already a debate, including with our local stakeholders who were visually impaired, about the safety. So we chose basically not to do anything with what are known as floating bus stops. My personal view, and I think it's the view of our wider BSIP team, is I'm certainly not anti-cyclist. I use my bike a lot, and when I worked and lived in the same town, I used to commute daily using it. So I very much understand there's an obvious need to make cyclists safer near large vehicles, but not, in my view, at the expense of the safety of pedestrians and particularly visually impaired people. And if you want floating bus stops to be safe, you need to train pedestrians to get out of cycle lanes, and you need to train cyclists to slow down at bus stops. And I think there's a big culture change required there before either of those things are achieved. And I think that I well understand the urgency to make them, to install them where there is a particular issue with cyclist safety. But I think we're perhaps putting the cart before the horse by rushing to do so before we've achieved that culture change, because I don't think they'll ever be safe until we do that. So we've basically decided not to do it at all in Portsmouth as part of BSIP.
Thank you, Rich. Yeah, I think there's 3 stops which count as either a bus board or floating bus stop in the city. Having come from a bus operator background, I was quite keen not to implement any of those as part of the capital programme. We've been proved right on that, but obviously we'll wait to see what further design guidance comes out in respect of that. So thank you. On to Neil, I think next. Another pre-submitted question. This one comes from Stephen Coles from Thurrock Council, and he's asking, is there a preference on shelter material type? What's your view on solar panels? And what's your view in terms of how you would position the shelter in terms of obstructions, trees and other things that might obscure views to the bus from the shelter?
Okay, let's take the material one first. So I'd say at the moment there's no single. I'd love to make them all out of wood, but I think it's a really beautiful material, but that's it's not practical at the moment. I don't think there is a single best material. We choose material based on things like durability, vandal resistance, maintenance costs, the ability to structure the product itself. So we still use metal. We're exploring composites. We've delivered a seat of composite. Composites have their own challenges in they can be really, really heavy. So there's lots of practical considerations. I think, as I mentioned in my presentation, there's this 360 approach, which means that you have to think about that when it comes to materials. So I'm not dodging the question, but there isn't. I think at the moment the established route is a recycled aluminium as much as possible. Low carbon or recycled glass, and recycled. So no virgin materials, I'd say, is probably the best way to approach. But we're starting to experiment with timber that's grown in Scotland. We've had quite a lot of success with that. So more to come on that, and we are doing more with composites. That's the one I'm most excited about because it's literally just recycling old waste into bus shelters. But I think that's going to be a longer route. Next one was solar. So solar, I'm a big advocate for solar. I think there are lots of use cases. I don't think I think you need to think about it more holistically again. So rather than just seeing it as a way to reduce energy costs, because you might not be reducing energy costs or carbon when you are if energy costs are low and or if you're using recycled, not recycled, so green electricity. So I'd suggest that it's really powerful for where you would have to install electricity. So stops that don't have power, I think it's criminal that bus shelters don't have lighting. So I think you should at least be able to power lighting. And now you can get RTPIs powered by lighting. And we've got an ad case that unfortunately isn't brilliant in the UK because of the weather, but we've got an ad case that can be powered by solar as well. And then I think in the future, not too far away, you'll be starting to get digital advertising panels that can be powered by solar as well. So I think you look at it more of a transformative technology to get shelters off grid, but also empower shelters where there is no electrical connection. Then the last one, Paul, was visibility.
Yeah, kind of positioning and sort of visibility with regards to trees and other sort of highway obstructions, I guess.
Yeah, we don't really have the control over this. So we have to. So obviously our customers are always the transport authority. So there are lots of regulations and guidelines that we have to follow, but also the siting is governed by the local authority. What I would say is that the UK streets are massively cluttered. I've been to bus stops where you cannot see the bus because the bus post is in the way, which I find amusing. So you're sitting in the seat, you can see the RTPI, but you can't actually see the bus coming because there's a bus post with a flag in the middle. So I think the approach needs to be more holistic. Michael and I were talking about this in terms of the bus stop standard, is that we focus on the stop itself, but not what's around the stop. So I think when it comes to tendering, you should think about what sits around and maybe include that within the tender, or think about how you lay out the area around the shelter itself. Does that answer the?
Yeah, and I think sort of it was alluded to in the presentations really that we did that initial 70 point assessment of every single bus stop in the city. So it's quite a small constrained city, island city. So about 579 stops. I think Rich will correct me. It might be 594. But basically we've got quite a lot of stops. But also kind of with that survey, we looked at what minor works might need to happen around the stops to facilitate the wider programme. So it might be things like moving bins, it might be repositioning bus stops because the bus stop pole might be for when buses have the doors at the back, literally. So it's that kind of thing. Michael, you wanted to comment on that?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I just want to kind of make the connection, not to intervene in your phenomenal chairing of the Q&A, but to make a connection between that question and another one in there, which is from Pete Dyson. And just to say, by the way, we've clearly got a fantastic audience on this webinar across the sector, local authorities, the public, and Pete Dyson, fantastic behavioural change scientist to Road Transport for Humans, and really understands the importance of the behavioural change side of this. There's a question about visibility for bus drivers of passengers waiting, and that's exactly the same thing that Neil's just alluded to. You can't see the flag post because you've got some other piece of infrastructure in the way. For many people waiting at the bus stop, they don't sit on that seat because they're scared the bus is going to go past. So that, there's a whole kind of piece around actually thinking about joining up the importance of the bus driver's visibility of the people waiting, vice versa. That's just a really great point. I just want to say thank you, Pete, for raising that. And I think it really ties together with what Neil's saying. So that whole kind of, it's almost like we've got an opportunity with this program to start from scratch about thinking about the entire sort of disposition of every element. Often we get questions from people about, having the when it's the case of shelters, if you've got the shelter protection on the wrong side of the road from their point of view, in terms of getting affected by splash from the road or weather protection, etc. All of this, it's almost like we've got a great opportunity for a bit of a blank canvas in exploring innovation. So thank you, Pete, for that question, and yeah, thank you for making that connection and really kind of challenging us, I think, to think more outside the box at this moment.
Okay, Rich.
Yeah, just to sort of underline all of that, I cannot underestimate enough. You cannot. God, I'll start again. I cannot stress enough the importance of speaking to your bus drivers. I have only worked for a council for 3 years, and before that, I worked just about every job in bus operations, starting off as a driver. And we have a unique insight about some of the stuff that we're specifically talking about in this question, but also the wider piece. Obviously, there are plenty of other stakeholders whose view is crucial towards developing any of this stuff that's all about long-term modal shift. But I don't think anybody really speaks to drivers. Certainly when I was working in bus depots, it never happened. And we've gained some unique insights. I think Paul mentioned it, like just shifting a bin out of the way at one stop allows them to align with the race curve more easily. And I didn't have the local knowledge of Portsmouth when I arrived, certainly not of every stop. And I don't think anybody else within our team at the council, it would just never occur to you because you wouldn't. And that's just one example. And it's a really, really important and unique insight for all of this stuff that I think everybody who's paying attention to what we're doing in Portsmouth should replicate.
Thank you, Rich. Moving on to another question. This one is online from Mark Philpotts. He said, upgrades to a decent standard will be attractive from a capital investment perspective, but what's the likelihood of revenue investment required to ensure sites remain to a good standard? That might be one for you to pick up, Rich. I could pick it up.
Yeah, well, sure. So clearly the initial capital investment is crucial to do the kind of stuff that we're doing in Portsmouth, but we've factored in the long-term revenue implications. There's no point us doing all this and in 5 years being back to square one or anything like it. As I said in my slides, if bus stops and bus shelters specifically look unloved or the kit doesn't work, then they'll soon take the perception of the whole area and the bus network as a whole. So we have with all of the work streams we're doing with Bauer Media Outdoor and other suppliers such as VIX, we've got equally good partnership working with, and the bus operators, the long-term revenue considerations, we've planned for them as much as we can up front using capital funding, but there will need to be the political will and sort of passion within the officer team to keep that going, 5, 10, 15 years into the future. Otherwise, why bother, I suppose.
Thanks. Next one, I'm bound to read this one out because it's a very nice one from Miriam Bishnok, who said, it's amazing. This is amazing work. We haven't paid her to say this, by the way. This is amazing work, and it's amazing to see it in real life when you attended the Quality Bus Conference. Glad you did, Miriam. And interested to hear if there are any further considerations around stakeholder engagement and vulnerable groups inclusion in design in line with the requirements of the emerging EP guidelines. I mean, Alison, you might want to cover quickly about some of the engagement we did with groups. I know you did in your presentation, but just underline some of that maybe.
Yeah, no, we've been working quite almost monthly with our visual impairment officer, and she has two groups that we consult with, or rather they consult with us. So we're very much aware of their needs. We've done a presentation, Rich and I, to the hard of hearing groups, where the amount of feedback we got there was phenomenal. I've never seen so many hands in the air asking us questions. So we have really made an effort to be as open as possible, to get feedback from all minority groups, to improve what we're doing and to keep on top of what we're doing.
Thank you for that, Alison. One now from Graham Collett from the York Civic Trust Transport Advisory Group. Probably one. I'll probably say one for Bauer, really. What would be needed for other authorities to copy the Portsmouth model? Maybe one for Sarah and possibly Rich, in terms of how to develop that relationship and ensure you can sort of deliver in a timely manner.
Well, I'll kick off. First thing is, speak to us. We've recently been awarded the York City contract, and it's actually my colleague up in the north that runs that contract, and we'd be delighted to sort of collaborate on a similar project. As I mentioned in the presentation, BSIP funding has opened up a lot of opportunities to a lot of councils, certainly this last round of funding, and that's what we're here for. We've explained the sort of business model to maintain the public infrastructure, but it's having those conversations, and it's having the time to really look beyond the day-to-day and understand the needs of communities. But yeah, it all starts with a conversation between us and the councils.
That's good. Anything to add to that, Rich?
So political will is essential. We, as we know in our team in Portsmouth, our local politicians are really supportive of this, and that allows you to sort of have these fairly ambitious plans that we've got. And it sort of loops back to the last answer I gave about the sort of long-term implications. We know we've got the local support politically at the moment, and hopefully into the future for that. Also, a genuine partnership approach. I get asked this a lot. It's really easy to call something a partnership, because it sounds nice and it might unlock a bit of funding, but it's just genuinely is a partnership, and it's not just Bauer. As I say, we've got other suppliers and partners of the bus operators, and what I mean by a genuine partnership is it's not just we've all got all of this backed up by legal agreements, as you would expect, because there's quite a lot of money involved, but we don't start waiving contracts and grant agreements at each other every time something goes wrong. We meet every week. If there's something not right, then we just discuss it and fix it. And some of Sarah's team on the ops side probably have got effigies of me that they're going to burn one day, but we're all pulling in the same direction, and it's absolutely crucial. And we've spoke to other authorities who have obviously got wind of what's going on in Portsmouth, and had people wanting to know what we're doing. And I say that's the most crucial part of any of this, and it's the first thing I say to anybody that we speak to, is that a genuine partnership, which you have to work on, but it's absolutely vital, and we're able to be agile and develop programs as we go, and you can only do that with that sort of ethos and attitude from everybody. It has to be on all sides, of course.
I should say as well, throughout the whole process, even before any of the Portsmouth City Council team here came on board, including myself, there's immense political buy-in, cross-party political buy-in within the city, which means that the stuff that we're doing now, delivering now, is fully supported. The exec member is totally into the Super Stop concept, the overall improvements of stops, the image that you saw about the Voying integrated dock is all really, really positively seen. And the good thing about having that relationship with Bauer and shelter suppliers is that actually the street scene in the city is improving through this contract and through this work. It's creating a whole new roadside that you probably wouldn't recognise from a Portsmouth, say 2 or 3 years ago, and it's really good to sort of see and get that feedback from people. A question for Michael next. Does your research distinguish between the granularity of printed at-stop media? So is there effectively a view amongst customers about timetable providing stop-specific timings or timings from the nearest timing point?
It hasn't thus far. Thanks for the question, Aidan. That's a really good question. It hasn't thus far. It's a very interesting suggestion. And I think, I say similarly, it could be worth exploring, if you like, even to zoom out from that, the relative importance of RTI versus printed timetables. Because we know that, in some cases, depending on the frequency of the service, people might not be interested in printed timetables at all. So I think there are sort of various aspects to that need further investigation. So thank you for the questions. Right, it's very useful. Yeah,
thank you. Great. A double header for Rich here. One from Diego Perez Alvarez, who says, sort of, how have we, what's the rationale for collating the technological elements within the shelter and not at the bus stop flag? And then Brenda Boardman is asking, can you expand on why bus shelters improve service reliability and network performance?
Yeah, sure. So the first question then, you've got more room to work on a shelter. So the focus, I mean, we're talking a lot about shelters today, obviously with our friends at Bauer being very much a part of this webinar. But it's not our roadside renaissance and our focus in Portsmouth on the roadside estate is not just shelters. When we've got a shelter and we aspire to have a shelter everywhere that we can fit one, but the footway space in Portsmouth is very, very restricted because it's a small island, as Paul's discussed, and there's not a lot of space to grow into. But where you've got a shelter, there is room for more kit, and we are obsessed with the information and comfort and security sort of branches of our work, and the shelter is key to that, and you can just get more stuff on there. There are about half of the stops in the city that don't have a shelter at the moment, and as I said, we're trying to reduce that number, but there will always be numerous places where there just will never be room for a shelter. But by the time this program is finished, all of those stops will also have a real-time display mounted on the flag and a timetable and push button audio real-time, which we've delivered with our friends at VIX, and we're working on another project to have e-ink timetables across the city, and that will include stops without a shelter as well. So although you've got a larger canvas to work on, I suppose, which is the rationale, it's certainly not just stops with shelters where we're investing in technology. Regarding the second part of that and the expanding on improving network reliability, so again, shelters themselves probably don't play a massive direct part in that. Certainly, loading people up with as much information about their journey as possible before they board the bus, particularly people who aren't frequent bus users. And again, I say this as a former bus driver. Good customer service from the operator's point of view is crucial, and that's obviously been a real challenge over the decades for bus operators to overcome. But it's miles better than it was when I first started and when I used to catch buses when I was a kid. But you'll have those conversations with people who perhaps don't know what the connecting journey will be, or what bus to get, or what time the return trip is. And drivers having those with passengers is a really key part of making bus travel more attractive. But also, if you can answer a lot of those questions before people get on the bus, that's going to help marginal gains. But yeah, it's by no means just bus shelters, and we've addressed dwell time issues at some stops. We're in the process of doing this. Some of my colleagues on the project manager team and BSIP are stop build outs and things such as that, so that buses don't get stuck in traffic as badly, so they can rejoin the traffic flow, saving seconds, which has up to minutes, which saves up to saving a PVR, which is a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, and things like that. So it's very much a marginal gain situation, but it's crucial, and we are delivering it, and it is working. We've already got evidence of a scheme. It's not specifically BSIP, it was CERT, where we've delivered huge journey time savings through bus priority measures. It's the same principle on a smaller scale at a stop by stop basis.
Thanks, Rich. Double header question coming for Neil, I think this. First part is from Keith Homer from M&M Transport Planning. What is the rate of graffiti and vandalism, and how does it vary between city centre and non-central locations? Mike Holmes asking a question about have there been issues with antisocial behaviour, and making the stop shelter attractive could attract unwanted groups hanging around. Perceptions of safety often feature in passenger surveys. What's your experience of that, Neil and colleagues?
So I'll answer the second one, then I'll probably hand the other one over to Sarah if that's okay, because she deals more on that side. I think it's so I guess it's a tricky balance, and I think it's one that we have to address in the National Bus Stop guidance because as operators and infrastructure providers, we want to make the estate as attractive as possible for people, which does mean that there's an uncomfortable tension between ensuring there's no antisocial behaviour, which unfortunately does include homelessness. So I think there's something that we collectively have to address there. I'm not going to try and solve it on this call, but in terms of safety, it's a key issue for us at the moment, and avoiding the antisocial behaviour does play into that. So, a short-term solution would probably be avoiding things like device charging, because if you talk to TFGM, they've got a lot of evidence that that increases antisocial behaviour. We did some research, and one of the people attending the research was a police officer who deals with antisocial behaviour, and she was saying in the research you should avoid attracting people to the bus stop, and mentioned specifically device charging. But more broadly, in terms of safety, I mentioned earlier, good lighting is an absolute imperative. The lighting that we've been developing, so you might think a bit of a dry subject, or quite a binary, it's good or it's not. But lighting is really important in terms of the brightness and heat levels, and the color, because if you can get appropriate lighting without it being super bright, it means that people can lip read at night, for example. So we've gone really, really hard on that. So our lighting is really uniform. That's one thing. Transparency within the shelter is another thing that people consciously talk to us about. Transparency lighting creates that sense of safety. And you also can see what you're walking into. The other thing is that we've been partnering with a charity called StrutSafe, and what three words are included on the shelter with their number. So not only can you identify exactly where you are, and obviously the emergency services now use what three words, it locates you within 3 meters, but also StrutSafe, you can call where we have StrutSafe operating, you can call StrutSafe and they'll happily walk you home. It's an amazing charity that started in Edinburgh by some students who were feeling unsafe at night, so they wanted to call and stay on the phone. We're also starting to look at CCTV. It is a visible presence that also helps as a kind of tool in the kit. The other thing, an obvious thing, is maintenance. I'll let Sarah talk about the maintenance, but perceived safety is part of having a well-maintained product. But I think there's a lot more to do on this. There's some things in the pipeline that we're working on, and I think we definitely, as a group of organisations, we haven't really nailed it yet, because all the research shows us that vulnerable groups, particularly women and girls, are avoiding public transport, in quite high numbers, whether it's at night or during the winter. So it's something that we have to address.
Just to pick up on the graffiti point, for Portsmouth specifically, you're very lucky actually, because Portsmouth has a very low level of graffiti, and most of the graffiti that is reported isn't actually in the city centre. So I don't know whether it's because you're not such a great destination for hen do's and stag do's, but there are other cities along the south coast that unfortunately do have higher levels. What I would say is that we have service level agreements with all of our councils when it comes to graffiti, and particularly smashed glass, which tends to be what most of graffiti is made up from. So we have, I think it's 8 hours we have to go out and get rid of any graffiti. Smashed glass is obviously less. But one of the things that was really impressive about when we were talking about super stops is there was never any question that there was going to be a 2-tier system of super stops. Alison made it clear that, super stops with all the functionalities should be available across the city. So yeah, we were really impressed with that.
That's good, thank you. While you're there, Sarah, Robert West has asked what is smart lighting?
Smart lighting is when it magically comes on when you enter the bus shelter. That's in very basic terms. Neil will probably have 5 minutes on the subject, but yes.
Well, thanks. We've only got 5 minutes left. So
magic lighting.
Unfortunately, there's no good way to name things. So everything is called smart, but it's really low power first of all, so it can run off solar, and then it's got sensors, so that it only operates during darkness. And as I said before, the lighting is really important. So we've worked on making sure it's really bright, so really low power, runs off solar, and doesn't cost very much.
Great
Just
stuff.
to add, Paul, on the Revive shelters, we've retrofitted motion sensor lighting, so all of the shelters will benefit from lighting that comes on or is brighter when a person enters the shelter.
Okay, thank you very much. That's good. Thanks for that. A fair few questions have come in asking about things like, do we need planning permission, liaising with the local authority departments and such like. Obviously, with highway authority, transport authority, we can put in highway infrastructure. We do have conservation areas, in particular in Old Portsmouth near the cathedral, for example, where we put in heritage style shelters in with our partners, and then they're sort of slightly different space, but kind of still within the sort of high quality range. We need to deal with the question from Nikki Swanson, who's asked about have we incorporated CCTV into the new shelters? How are they managed, and how has it improved perceptions of safety? No is the answer in terms of internal, but what we have done is I worked with other colleagues in the City Council who identified 40 key hotspots where antisocial behaviour or crime might happen, and we've actually incorporated additional CCTV as part of the wider city CCTV network that overlooks the shelters as standard. Jenny makes a very good point, and sorry to hear about your situation there, Jenny, that you encountered, but the idea is that we've done some work as well around violence with women and girls, interviewing, talking to people on the network locally that use the transport network, and we've started to develop a whole VORG program around that, both capital and revenue, including travel safe officers, which we're going to be rolling out over the next financial year. And it's a really innovative piece of work, I think, not anything to do with me. That's why it's innovative. And we will be in a situation to share that with other partners fairly shortly. So I'm more than happy to do that. Also, if anybody does want to pop down to Portsmouth, have a little look around, we're more than happy as a team to do that, as well as Bauer as well. So it's, you can either pop down and have a look yourself, or make arrangements to come down and see us. We'll do that. We've got around about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to just round up with each of our contributors in the last 2 minutes, and just ask a quick question on which they've got 30 seconds to answer, after which they will be cut off. And we'll go in the order of the presentation. So we'll start with Michael and then move on. What is the key thing from the work that you've been doing, the research you've been doing, the program, the projects that we've been doing, that you've learned, or would you change or do differently from what we've implemented? So we'll start with Michael.
I think the key thing we've learned is how important this issue is, really. And I think it's, as an organisation like us, we've been around for a long time, doing kind of very sort of long-term work, often behind the scenes, in terms of funding priorities, rail, transport taxation, all of this stuff. It was in a sense a bit of a bold step for us to go out and say, look, bus stops. It's such a sort of simple thing in some respects, but it's something which matters so much. And I think the key thing we've learned is actually how important that is, and how important it was for us to kind of take that step and say, let's actually draw the sector together and talk about this. So that's been a big learning. I think the response nationally has shown that. In terms of what we do, better next time, I would say, well, we're continuing to develop this. It's in its early stages, if you like. I mean, people are moving fast, particularly in Portsmouth. But what I'd say we will do better and improve on is in some of the things which have been suggested in this really fantastic webinar. I mean, I think things like exploring the relative prioritization between types of printed information, types of timetable, relative importance of RTI vis-a-vis printed, ongoing surveying to actually measure. And Rich, it's fantastic to hear that you've got that evidence straight away from Portsmouth, or early stages from Portsmouth, and the improvements having an impact. But I think for us, to continue to demonstrate the importance of upgrade will be key. And indeed, other suggestions in the questions Q&A here about funding, obviously capital and revenue balance, ensuring that the revenue investment is there to ensure that maintenance happens. But of course, part of the standards ensuring that these stopping places are regularly maintained. That's absolutely key. So yeah, in terms of what we'll do better, it's many of the things that have been suggested, and continue to work with the sector, continue to work with government, and continue to work absolutely with the public as well. So so thank you. I hope that answers two.
Wasn't 30 seconds, it's more like 2 minutes, but we'll let you crack on as it's you. Neil, a quick 10 seconds from you.
I think what I said earlier, basically, look at everything in the round. You need a holistic approach, lots of insight and user-centric approach, and then deliver, as cliched it is, through collaboration and partnership. Think short-term as well as long-term, and don't lose sight of your goals.
Great stuff. Thank you, Rich.
Without wishing to get too geeky project manager, because those of you who work with me know that I'm a bus driver masquerading as a project manager sometimes. Be agile. We've kind of fallen into this place anyway now, I think, certainly with our work with Bauer, but I started off with a great big list of things that I wanted to do, and that was kind of fixed, and you have to do a bit of that to sort of agree budgets and draft grant agreements and what have you. But the program has definitely developed as we've been delivering it, and everybody has benefited from that approach, and I probably arrived to that kind of way of working later, but certainly in terms of what bus users in Portsmouth will experience when we've finished, been more agile about it, as it would definitely bear fruit. And if we'd have done that from the start, it would have been exponentially better.
Okay, thank you. Alison.
Stick to your guns. We wanted a 5-star super stop, and we went down a little bit of a rabbit hole where our colleagues within PCC said no to Wi-Fi. They said it was going to be too challenging, and 101 different reasons why not. And then suddenly we had a light bulb moment where Bauer said, well, there are shelters, we own and manage them, we'll sort the Wi-Fi out. So we got the Wi-Fi in there, and by sticking to our guns and having that 5-star product, I think it's really important, because that sort of we set the standard, and it's really important for passengers to realise the investment for that upward spiral, and not to get too caught up with oh, they're going to get vandalised, oh, there's too much kit, so this is going to happen. But just to stick to your guns and get that 5-star standard across.
Great stuff. Thank you. And finally, Sarah.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I've learned a lot about accessibility and inclusivity. And before, starting this project, you just assume the bus stop's there and everyone can use them. But it's the little things like, the yellow mid-rail that you can see behind Rich, that's really important to visually impaired people. So when I look at other projects now, I always sort of look for that, as not always the yellow, but you have to think about all of the people with disabilities that have to use the bus stop.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to our presenters for presenting today. Really appreciate it. Technologically, it's gone as well as can be expected, I think. Thanks for everybody for submitting questions, and also for your comments in the comments box. We'll be undertaking to respond to those questions, anything that arises from that between us all, and dealing with that as part of the normal process. I'd like to thank Bauer Media Outdoor, my colleagues from Portsmouth City Council, and also Landor LINKS for organising today's conference. We do sorry, that's awful. I am sorry that we've overran by a few minutes, but it was just important to try and get as much of those questions in as we possibly could. Sorry if we didn't get to your particular question, but hopefully we've incorporated it into the round. And like I say, anything you want, just get in touch with any of us at Bauer or indeed Portsmouth City Council, and we'll be more than happy to talk to you some more. Have a great rest of the day, and thank you for attending. Bye bye, everyone.